The limited partner shares in the potentially outsized returns of a well-planned and executed investment, but as a passive investor, and has the maximum leverage on their most precious asset, their time. And that is why we're here together. 90% of the millionaires out there built their net worth with real estate. However, 0% of the billionaires are hands-on managing their real estate assets because there simply isn't enough time. My name is Jake Wiley, and for the past 16 years, I've been investing in real estate, and I've learned a thing or two. But the most important lesson is how to leverage the expertise and time of others to maximize your investment potential. Welcome to the Limited Partner Podcast. All right, partners, this is an exciting episode because this is really the last episode of what I'm calling kind of the first season, which is almost 90 episodes in total. But I'm getting ready to go take a little bit of a break, go do some traveling with the family, put a little space between myself and the show to get reinvigorated about what's to come. And this is the last one. And along the way, I've had a lot of people ask me, well, how do you stay on top of all of the news? How are you so current? How do you keep everything organized? Like, where does all the stuff for these episodes come from? And in today's episode, I'm going to share with you the tools that I'm using to stay on top of the news and really stay educated on what's happening right now and where and how I keep my notes. So I think this is going to be a fun show. And I'll tell you, a lot of credit for what I'm about to share with you goes out to Tiago Forte. He wrote this book, Building a Second Brain. And it's just really this amazing book about basically everything that I'm going to share with you, plus a lot more. So this is a kind of a Cliff's Note version of his book. But I'm gonna drop a link to the book in the show notes. So if you're actually interested in this after the show, go check it out. But really the idea of the book, and the idea is that you don't actually have to learn all of this stuff. You don't have to be an expert in everything. Like, you don't have to be able to rattle all of this knowledge off the top of your head every week. Everything you learn, basically what you do is you create this digital second brain, which is basically notes, articles, and everything that you can easily access at any point in time. And they're like notes for your future self. Like, at some point, I think I'm going to use this, or I think this is a great piece that I want to bring into a podcast. Like, boom, I just highlight it and I put it in a place in Evernote, and I'm able to come back and get it and search it and whenever I want to use it. Sometimes I may say, like, not now, but later, but it's all totally searchable. And this is a game changer, really for life, right? Not just like me trying to put this stuff out in there, together for like the podcast or my newsletters, but like anything that might be digital in nature. Like, I can just go park it and basically say, hey, this is something that I will likely be or might be interested in the future. And I surely don't want to try and remember it. I surely don't want to just leave it somewhere out as like a bookmark and hope I can find it, because that's the way I used to work. And a lot of times I just wouldn't know anything. Or, went through phases where I was trying to just like remember everything and just be the smartest person in the room. And frankly, like, creating this idea of this digital second brain where I can just go park stuff, and all I just had to know how to use is my search function, and I can pull it up in seconds, basically on my computer, on my phone, wherever I'm at. Like, I can either create and park the notes or then go retrieve them when I need them. And it makes me seem like I know everything that's happening all of the time. And I can go back in time and be real smart. Like, oh, remember when this is happening? It's just because I'm pulling it up because I know that I had them. But before we really get into all of the nits and gnats of the tools, I do want to say, like, we are in the back half of the summer. And like I said, I'm getting ready to hit the road with the family. And we're going to go spend a couple weeks. I'm going to be completely disconnected. And, the plan is just truly be present, be disconnected from like work, podcast, all of these things to just refresh, but more importantly, make some memories. And I want to give a big shout out to Jesse Etzler, who's got this Build Your Life resume program that my wife and I are members of. And, the whole concept is plan the things that you want in your life and get them on your calendar so that you do them, as opposed to being kind of like just buffeted by the winds of life. You wake up and it's like, oh, I got a bunch of emails, or this is important, or, oh, like we're thinking about doing something, but these weeks have gotten away from me. Like, I got to make up time. Instead, you just kind of say, hey, look, these are the things I want to accomplish this year. And you go out and put them on the calendar. So like the dates are already locked in, and it's not just like, hey, I want to take a trip, but it's also, do you want to do a race, whatever, like challenging things for yourself. You put them on the calendar, and then you kind of build your life around it. So at the end of the year, you can look back and be like, man, look at all the cool stuff I've done. And it wasn't by happenstance, because like I've noticed that I feel like I get up on the treadmill a little bit sometimes, where it's like, a month goes by and like all I've done is just churned, right? Like nothing's really improved. I didn't do anything new or exciting. I just did a bunch of work, and, Nat, like I'm a month down the road, I'm older, and I don't really have anything to show for it. And like, that's Jesse's whole mission, and that's the program, and it's really cool. And I just simplified it. But by the way, if any of you know Jesse Etzler, he is on my top 3 list of people that I'd really like to meet. So if you know him and you can make an intro, I'd appreciate that. So just hit me up at Jake at the Limited Partner, or find me on Instagram or LinkedIn or wherever, and I'd really appreciate it. But enough of that. This is going to be a lot of fun. But again, thanks Jesse for helping me focus on Build Your Life, and getting because of that, I'm really excited about actually taking some time and being really present. And I've probably mentioned this on several of the podcasts before. A lot of times when I go on vacation, I'm only like half there, right? Because I'm like, my mind, there's a couple things I really needed to do, or things that are popping up. But, with this Build Your Life resume program, my mind's in the right place. I am super excited about taking some time and getting some space and getting refreshed and recharged. And then frankly, I know that I'm going to come back with some really cool ideas, and this is going to be a different show, not in like a dramatically different way, but like we're going to pull some new things in. We're going to try some new stuff, and I'm excited to come back and bring that to you. But let's get into the tools. As I promised, for those of you that are wondering like where the heck you're going to get all this great information that I provide every week, and how do I find it, I'm going to tell you how I do it. And, you can replicate it yourself. First, go check out that book, Building a Second Brain. Tiago Forte is the author. Like I said, there will be a link in the show notes to make that super easy for you. All right, so the first tool I want to talk about is Feedly. Feedly is really been a game changer for me, streamlined my process. I mean, it's night and day, and it just really helps me pull everything together. By basically looking at headlines across a bunch of different news feeds, I can see trends really quickly. I had a bunch of websites that I typically used for my news, right? So I had bookmarks, and I'd go to the bookmark and I'd try and read all the articles, and then trying to kind of remember where things were, and then copy and paste some things and keep notes. It was tedious. And as a result, like I wasn't giving it the same rigor every day. So fast forward to today, where I use Feedly. Basically what Feedly does is it just pulls in all of the news from the sites that you choose. So I have a list of, call it 20 commercial real estate sites that I just want to see what's going on. And I put them in Feedly. So Feedly pulls basically a headline, and then a lot of times like an AI generated synopsis of the entire article into the feed. So when I go in, I look at my quote unquote real estate or commercial real estate feed, I can just skim headlines, over the course of a week or whatever I want to look at. And really quickly, I can start to see what the trends are and what's kind of keeps popping to the top over and over again. And that really kind of helps me see, okay, not just are these isolated articles, do these mean anything, but like are different feeds pulling this in? Is it happening is there new updates every day? And then I use that, and basically I can then click a little star on that and move it to a list that says I'm going to come back and actually read those articles later. So I just do a first pass as I just go through, and I say, I'm going to look for the past couple days, see what's popped up and what's trending, right? I click a little star, moves it to a list to read later. So you're not reading at this point in time. And like a lot of times I'll just walk away. I'm like, okay, like I've let my mind marinate on the trends, and then I come back and I do a reading session, and I'll go through those articles and I'll say, okay, like let's start reading these. And some of the articles are really good. Some of them are like, okay, like I don't need that anymore. But then what I do is I take the ones that I really like, or I think that are relevant, and I would want to be able to recall that at some point in the future. Remember this whole building a second brain, like I'm basically making notes for my future self. And then I put it in a board in Feedly. And that board is for a particular topic, or it could be like for a particular week, however I want to set it up. And then I just park those articles, right? So now I've got a really concise list of what I think, based on the scan of the headlines and the AI generated kind of synopsis, like what's really trending in the market. Then I do a deep read of all of the specific reads, the articles and everything. And then I even parse that and curate those articles down to the ones that I'm like, this really encapsulates this issue and this topic. And I put it in a board. So now I have a board sitting there. And the board could be for a newsletter. It could be one of the topics that I use for this podcast, but it's all there. So that's how I use Feedly. And honestly, like that whole process for like a week's worth of probably articles, and even the deep read where like I'm basically skimming the articles and headlines and then putting them on the side. So like I can do all of that in probably 5 minutes for a whole week of all the feeds that I've got, because like you're just looking for like, what are the trends? What's interesting? What do I think I might want to read? Click that, move it to the side, then come back. And then I just do reads, right? Like I don't star every article. Like, if I see the same article pop up 3 times, I'm only going to move one. Then I look at those and I say, okay, out of these, which ones really encapsulate what I'm doing? And then I move those to a board. So within 30 minutes, I am as sharp as I can be on all of the real estate that's out there in the market, at least in my mind. For the podcast, when I'm talking to guests, like what do I want to talk to them about? Because I'm looking at what's current in the marketplace and we're getting really interesting conversations. And then basically we go from Feedly over to Evernote. So Evernote is it's one of the most popular probably note-taking apps, but it does a lot. Like you can pull in PDFs and files and pictures and articles, but I'll tell you how I use it. And I am only scratching the surface of Evernote. And I know that. Here are the top 3 things. But one, it's a repository for the various projects and all the relevant working notes in the source docs that I'm working on like at any given time. So I have things that I am working on, and everything that I think is related to that, I put into basically folders that are notes, right? It could be an article, it could be a picture, it could be my notes, whatever it is. So that goes into a folder. Number 2, it's a place where I can link up all of the source docs and then write notes on them for future use. So it's not just like, hey, here's a link from an article. Like I can actually take notes and like really summarize like, hey, why is this important to me? To the point where like I really probably don't even need the article, but it's always there if I need to recall it. But the idea is just to have it in a place where it makes my life easier in the future, right? So I've got all these things. And then lastly, this is where I think it's super powerful and probably the biggest selling feature for me is I read a bunch of nonfiction books. And this is a place where I can move my highlights from my reading of my Kindle into its own notes. So let's just say a great example, because we've already talked about it, is Building Your Second Brain. It's a long book. There's a lot of things in there. But like as I was reading it, like I could pick out the things like, oh, this is how we want to look at it. This is where, they talk about how to use Evernote, or this is where, the context on Feedly comes in. You can just highlight that in my Kindle. If it's something that's like, oh, why did I highlight this, right? If it's not obvious, like what was I thinking when I highlighted, you can also like, while I highlight it, I take a little note in my Kindle, and then that's all sitting in my Kindle synced up and it's right there. So like theoretically, I could always go back to my Kindle and open it up and then, scroll through all my highlights. But frankly, I never did that before because like it was just seemed like it was tedious and it really didn't help me much. But then comes along another tool called Readwise, which sucks all of your Kindle highlights into basically Readwise, and then it can output it into an Evernote note. I guess that's probably how you'd say it. So when I do all my highlights, you can highlight chapter titles or whatever and put some headings in there so it has some structure, but I put my notes in there. And then if I take little notes while I'm reading, like those pop up as well. And then basically through Readwise, it sucks all of those highlights and notes into Readwise, and then it syncs with Evernote. So when I open up Evernote, I then have this one note that would be like Building a Second Brain note, right? And then in there are all my highlights. So effectively what it becomes is like you just create these Cliff's Notes versions of the books that you read. And it's just the stuff that is like super important or like your thoughts along the way. And like, so now I can go back anytime I'm like, oh, what was that thing about, Evernote in, Building a Second Brain? I just go pull up my Evernote and click on the link and just kind of scroll through my notes. And again, it's like Cliff's Notes. I can read every highlight that I've taken in the book in probably under 5 minutes. So it's like you take a book that took me 2.5 hours to read, plus highlight, and then synced it down to like 5 minutes of like what was really important to me. And then honestly, like a lot of times you can actually click in the link, and if you've got your Kindle synced up, it'll take you right to that place in the book. And then you can pull it up and read the context around it if you didn't do a good job of summarizing it. But anyway, those tools, so Feedly bringing in all of my news, Readwise basically sucking in all of my Kindle highlights and putting it in a way that can then shoot over to Evernote. So now I've got in Evernote, I've got all of the projects that I'm working on, all the relevant documents, source notes, and sometimes there are links to files on my computer, sometimes they're the files themselves. Sometimes there's the articles, but then you can take notes on top of those, right? So you bring it in and you're like, here's an article, but like, here's my summary of it. And then lastly, what has like been the real game changer of this whole process is like all of the highlights that I take in my Kindle books of my nonfiction books. I don't do this for fiction books, but like I now have it at my fingertips. And then like the magic, like this is really the power, is that like Evernote is just searchable. It's got like a search bar in there. So I don't even have to remember like where it was. Like if I wanted to say like building a second brain, I know that's the book, or Tiago Forte or whatever, I can just type that into a search bar and it'll go then pull up every note that's related to that topic. And I can be like, oh, that's the one that I wanted, right? And then you just dig into it. So now I've got the book. Or if like I wanted to, I remember there was like a foreclosure on a property in Houston. I could type in foreclosure and Houston, right? And it'll go to my notes and it'll find that article and then my notes on it, right? Like it's all right there. And like I said before, it's on my computer, it's on my mobile phone, it could be on my iPad. Like I have it everywhere I need to go. So I don't have to actually remember this stuff anymore. And that's like the weight off of my shoulders. So like I, at any given time, probably give me within 2 minutes, I can be pretty sharp on just about any topic that I've ever talked about on this podcast because it's all in my Evernote, right? And it comes from all these different sources and I can find them and they're very easy to get to. And again, like Evernote will sync with Feedly, right? So like all that stuff that I'm pulling down and moving over, like I can have that all synced and ready to go. So again, one last shout out to Tiago Forte for building a second brain, because it's like changed the way I look and kind of, my workload. And like, frankly, the pressure that comes with trying to have remembered all that stuff or going to all these different places. Like I just pull up Evernote and I search all the time. Like I've got kind of a folder structure in Evernote, but I don't even really worry about that anymore. As long as I know like one of the pieces of the context that I'm looking for, I just search it and it pulls it right up. For those of you that are out there that are, looking to maybe get a little bit sharper on a topic, whether it be real estate like I do for this podcast, for my newsletters, and frankly, for the conversations I have every day, or it could be anything. It could be about weight loss, like whatever you want. My recommendation is find the sources of information that are interesting to you and get that into Feedly. And then the other cool thing about Feedly too, I forgot to mention this, but this is actually really cool, is that all the newsletters that you sign up for that go into your inbox, like on your, in your inbox, email inbox, you can set up an email address in Feedly that you basically put over, when you sign up for the newsletters, you put this email address in, it'll actually pull those newsletters in as well. So now, like, instead of getting, my inbox full of all these different newsletters, like I just send them to Feedly. And then I can, similar the way I can do, I can scan, the headlines. It basically scans the subject lines and I can read, oh, that's one I want to dig into, or like, no, that's not important, but it's no longer in my inbox. And it's not like they all would come in at super random times. So now I can say like, I'm interested in airplanes, right? Like that's something we're looking for, an airplane now. And, like I've got feeds and news and anything that I'm kind of like chasing on that particular, it's got its own feed. I just pull it up, I look at it, and I'm not like following like newsletters or whatever in my inbox, which, one's going to come in the middle of the night, another one comes in right in the middle of the day. And then like, it just gets lost either in my email or I'm having to search it or I'm trying to read it at really random times. Like I just turn my brain on like, okay, right now I'm doing scan mode. I'm just looking for trends and topics that might be interesting. Highlight those, right? Okay. Then the next step is I am actually looking to do a deeper dive and read and see which of this stuff is relevant. And I actually care to keep notes on that or basically share with my future self. And then lastly, you just take that information and then you do something with it. So content creation, or whether it's a diet, whether it's a hobby, like whatever you want to do, like you can totally get that through the Feedly process into Evernote, and it just becomes magic for you. So that is my process. That's what I've done. I'm able to, work a full-time job, run a podcast, a newsletter, do all of these things now because like I just have a system for it. It's very easy. It's very clean. And I totally recommend it. So while I am out, resting, relaxing, recharging, spending time with the family, if you are looking to create a system to help you stay on top of the news, like I've been doing here, this is the system that I'd recommend. And if you're just like, hey, that wasn't enough, definitely go get Tiago Forte's book, Building a Second Brain. I think it took me 2.5 hours. Do your highlights, right? Sync them up with Readwise and send them into your notes. And, you'll have everything at the tip of your fingers. But I hope this was good. I'm looking forward to this break, super excited about the opportunity to get away. I'm super excited about what this is going to look like on the flip side. And I'm really interested to hear what you're interested in. What do you want to learn about? What should the next season of the Limited Partner, incorporate? Let's make it fun. I want to re-energize this as well. So if you got anything that you want to bring into the conversation, shoot me a note at Jake at the Limited Partner, and we'll see you on the flip side. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and I'd actually love for you to contribute to a future episode. If you have a question you'd like answered, or a topic or a guest to bring on the show, please email me at jake@thelimitedpartner.com. Now I realize there's a lot of lingo that's thrown around on these shows, so I've created a cheat sheet for you with the top 26 terms that come up most often. Head on over to thelimitedpartner.com/lingo for the list. Enjoy, and we'll see you next time.